Hello everybody, my name is Evan, welcome to another Brawlhalla video. Today we're going to be talking about, I don't know man, what I learned in my philosophy class, I guess, because if you didn't know, I just joined university, right? So this is going to be my first ever talk about that, I guess. Like not necessarily university in general, but like the philosophy class that I took, because I never took anything related to that academically. So yeah, so who is Socrates, right? Socrates, famous guy. Literally everybody knows about him, but I don't think a lot of people know who he really is, what his views actually are. They just hear the name here and there, you know? Socrates is not an elitist. Like he actually thinks of everyone to be somewhat equal. You know, he'll talk to anybody who's in the highest power class. He'll talk to anybody who's in poverty or in who are slaves, you know. And because he believes that most people have the general intuition to actually grasp about certain things without needing academics. For example, right, in one conversation, Socrates decided to talk to a slave boy who he believed actually had a intuitive grasp on geometry, right? So he asked a geometrical question and asked him to actually answer it himself, and he did correctly, which further proved his point that every human being, and no matter their academic grasp, has some sort of general knowledge intuitively, born with it, you know. And so the whole method that Socrates is saying about subjecting things to rational criticism is not based on who says it, but just whether or not it makes sense, you know. And then we have Plato. Plato's Socrates' friend, and they've had a few conversations here and there. Plato does not like democracy. He thinks that some people should not have the right to vote. This is largely because of Socrates being voted out by their own people to death because I think it was something to do with Socrates plaguing the minds of the young. I think that's a good way to say it. And so Plato thinks that people should not all people should have the right to vote. So to Plato, he's super cautious on how societies should be formed and should be structured because of the event with Socrates, which really deeply affected his way of politics, which is really unfortunate. And that brings us to the Republic, which is a series of books that were made by Plato to talk about society, politics, education. Not education or justice too deeply, but mostly about society and politics, which really centered around the question what is considered justice. That's what made Plato and Socrates have a full conversation about it. And what is that guy doing? Hold on, let me scroll down in my notes. It's not asking oh, is this law just, or is this person just, but rather what is actually justice in of itself. And while Plato and Socrates were conversing about okay, what is actually considered justice, there's another character that comes in. His name is Thrasymachus. He's a sophist that talks about how, you know, justice is not actually about being just, but rather a way for the powerful to control the people. Because he really thinks that people are not just for the sake of being nice, for the sake of being actually just, but rather because people are afraid of the consequences of breaking the law. It's too much to bear. That brings us to this other story, which is called the Ring of Gyges, which is this guy named Gyges found a ring in which it makes him invisible. Once worn, it makes him invisible. And oh wow, that guy just destroyed me. So what does he do with the power of being invisible? Well, he does whatever he wants. And Thrasymachus' point is that once the law is not there, people are going to do whatever they want. They're gonna cheat, they're gonna steal, probably kill, and they won't get caught with any of that because they're not subject to the law. And so the argument here is that if no one can see you, then you would do whatever you want. Thrasymachus has no faith in the people whatsoever, as you can see. And, you know, Socrates doesn't buy it. Like, Plato and Socrates does not buy it and think that, you know, people actually follow the law, or justice in of itself is not just a convention that's built by the rich and powerful, I mean, to control the people. Oh wow, I'm dumb. So Thrasymachus is saying that it's very useful for the powerful to control the people. That's basically what the law is for. We're not really talking about the law, but rather like what justice in of itself, like what is considered justice, right? Plato thinks that within justice there are like 3 parts of the soul and like society to make it an actual ideal society that would serve justice to everyone. Within society, Plato thinks that there are 3 points, which are 3 types of people that would be in society, which is guardians, which are the like rulers of the city, the auxiliaries, or the people that like protect the city, and just the workers. Plato believes that in a very just society, then people should be doing whatever they are best at rather than whatever people want, because it'll make everything a lot easier for everyone, and that it would benefit everyone, I mean. And the difference between like guardians, the people who rule the city, and like actual tyrants of that age is that the guardians don't necessarily want to be a guardian. It's just that they're better at it than other people, and in that type of society, then everybody would have their own work to do, which means like the classes in that type of society does its job and only its job. That means like guardians don't farm, you know, the workers don't rule or defend, and the auxiliaries just work under the guardians. And also the guardians in of itself are technically only subsidized by the people. They don't collect like taxes or really like get any sort of monetary value out of anything that they do. And it's just that the workers themselves are the ones that trade among themselves, or actually do gain some sort of currency that they can use within each other, right? And that is Plato's like ideal society. And you might be thinking, all right, who is fit to rule like this type of city? And Plato argues that philosophers are the ones that are supposed to be ruling the city. And then people are like, wait, what do you mean, like philosophers? Have you seen the philosophers of our generation? They're just not fit for that. And Plato argues that there are fake philosophers and real philosophers, right, that are fit to actually rule this type of city. And okay, what is that, right? What is a real and what is a fake philosopher? Now we get into this other story, which is called the allegory of the cave. Alright, so we're just gonna go through like the allegory of the cave within its very basic interpretation and very basic okay, that's not good. Story-like elements by itself, okay? So in the allegory of the cave, we have a bunch of prisoners that are chained to a wall inside a cave, right? And within that cave, they are only facing one direction, which is the wall. And on that wall, they see shadows, and they've lived inside that cave throughout their entire life, and they've only seen those shadows by themselves. And since they see only shadows, they think that those shadows are trees, people, whatever. Like they think that that is reality in of itself, right? And so what does that also mean when there are shadows being casted on the wall? That means that there is a light source behind them, possibly like a fire, right? And they don't know anything else. Let's just call this stage 1, all right? And in stage 1, the prisoners don't know about anything. That's just their reality. In stage 2, one of those prisoners, are dragged out of that reality. They're dragged out of... they're forced to turn around and look at the fire. And so what happens? Well, their eyes need to really, really adjust to the fire, because if you look directly in a fire, after like hours or maybe like just an extended period of time, it hurts. It's painful. And so like eventually the prisoner's eyes actually do adjust. And when they do, they realize that this is not their actual reality. What they've been living through the entire time was not real. It's just it was created by the fire like there. And that's stage 2, right? And then stage 3, the prisoners are just dragged out of the cave. Completely dragged out of the cave into the sunlight. And that's when it really, really hurts their eyes. Because not only is there light, but like the strongest light that you could ever like see. So of course it takes a lot of time for the eyes to adjust. And like at first, like they can't even look directly up because it's too much light, right? And so they look at the reflections in the water and the shadows. And after looking at the shadows and reflections, they eventually start to be able to see the objects that are around them. And right when curiosity really hits, the sun eventually, right? And once the eyes are actually fit to actually look at the sun. That stuff's painful. Do not look directly in the sun. I do not advise you to look directly in the sun. But yeah, like this person was very curious because their entire life they've been subjected to the cave. So they've finally hit this actual reality that's just beyond anything that everybody else has ever seen, right? And so what do you want to do? Like, do you want to tell the other people, or do you want to keep it to yourself? That's what differentiates, like, according to Plato, real and fake philosophers. Because keep in mind, if you're actually trying to convince a bunch of cave people about this other life that actually does exist, you would have to drag yourself into the cave where your eyes are no longer inclined to seeing in the dark, and therefore you look crazy to them. That's for one. And when you're talking to them, you are completely outnumbered. You probably are just eventually going to be killed by the cave people because that you're crazy and you're lingering in the dark, crawling, trying to find your way to other people while everybody else just looks at you kind of weird. Going back inside the cave is stage 4, and you're just going to be in this story, like, they're just laughing stock to the rest of the cave people, right? Because they're trying to find their way in the dark, and they're trying to explain things that, like, to them doesn't exist. So what does this mean? I mean, the base interpretation of it is just that the cave is the world of appearances, what seems real, and the upper world, or the world with sunlight that's outside, is what truly is, you know, the world of forms. So the cave is known through like sense perception, where it's based on opinions and illusion, while the upper world is known through reason, truth, knowledge, being, you know, where the shadows are just temporary like forms that are eternal. I mean, shadows are changing and temporary, while the forms or objects in the real world are eternal and unchanging. And there are other interpretations of this, you know, like education. Education isn't about memorizing facts, it's about the wrenching of the soul when you are being dragged out. Where real education is painful, disorienting, but like freeing. And the dragging is that inner force that's like pulling you toward the truth, even if a part of you resists. And I don't know if you've tried this, but like really grasping concepts that are completely different to what you've been inclined to think like is really, really difficult and painful, right? Technically, you never have to leave stage 1. You could stay there and get good at talking about shadows to the other people, and you technically not only survive, you'd rule. But on the other side, wisdom requires struggle, reorientation, and like the resistance to comfort, the willingness to actually go through that pain to learn something new. That's the educational interpretation. There's a religious one, but I'm not gonna go into that because I'm not too familiar uh, with that interpretation, other than the sun representing like a transcendent divine reality. Everything that's living is completely dependent on the sun, and that you don't get there through argument alone, but through faith or vision. Why am I getting rollbacks? This is annoying. Like it's an experience that's really difficult to communicate once you've reached the upper world. And so yeah, I don't got much for the religious interpretation. Then there's the political interpretation, where Plato thinks that most people are just stage 1 dwellers, the people, the prisoners that look directly at the wall and at nothing else. Plato thinks that most people are just passive consumers, basically. And so like Plato critiques democracy as just giving people what they want isn't as good as giving what people need. That's his argument. He says that laws and values are conventions, but that true justice must be grounded in reason. And remember how I talked about like there are 3 classes in an ideal society? To Plato, there are also 3 parts of the soul, which is reason, which seeks truth; spirit, which gives the person courage, indignation, and emotion; and wow, my stare didn't come out? That's not good. And appetite, which controls the people's appetite, desires, wants, and basically basic needs. And what is up with that platform? And so when each part of the city does its role, you know, with the guardian, the auxiliary, and the worker, then it would serve justice with everyone. And that's the same with the soul. If we go through the classes the way that Plato thinks, he thinks that appetite should come first, then spirit, then reason, as a final. And so the justice in the soul is when the reason rules, the spirit helps, and the appetite stays in lane, basically. And most people, right, appetite or emotions just run wild, while reason drowns out, which is why Plato thinks that these classes or parts of the soul should be structured in that way, so we know which one is the most important to really prioritize. And Plato thinks that education should structure the soul so that reason leads every other part of the soul. And wow, what? So Plato thinks that being just is to be unified with oneself, and that like injustice is just having a civil war against yourself, basically. So I don't think I have too much left, other than if we're talking about the allegory of the cave, the philosopher is the one that leaves the cave, sees the truth, and then returns even if it costs them everything, even if it's so difficult that to explain and convince everyone. The philosopher will still continue to try, because they love wisdom, not power, not money. And that like when we're talking about an ideal society to them, it is a 3-class system where the highest class isn't someone that wants to be the highest class, but rather is good at being at the highest part, and that they also have to be not just intelligent, but also wise. Because we know that people can be clever, but not wise, and that philosophy isn't about having all the answers, but rather like being willing to suffer in pursuit of the truth. And wow, can this get? Can you stop here? All right. Well, that's what I learned in one lecture in philosophy, because I also just really wanted to talk about it. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Goodbye.